Good morning. I'm Carmen McBride. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness. No matter who you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming, we greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to everyone watching us on YouTube this morning. During the prelude, please introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you're from. If it's Oklahoma City, what neighborhood you're in. If it's from someplace else, let us know what city you're in. And now, the prelude prepares us for worship.
We light our chalice here in our building in Midtown, Oklahoma City, on land that was home to indigenous peoples, including the Apache, Caddo, and Wichita, on land that was taken from the Creek in Seminole and other removed and relocated peoples. Because we are a multi-platform congregation, our chalice is also lit today in Southeast Guthrie, in Oklahoma City, and in sick beds and other homes in 30 locations this morning. We light our chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope. Welcome.
Welcome again to those who are joining us online and everyone here in the sanctuary today. Todos son bienvenidos aquí. Again, this morning, a candle of peace is lit in honor of the people of Ukraine and the brave Russians who are risking their safety to protest against Putin's invasion, and all people and all the world's beings who suffer in the face of war. Let's begin our service this morning with a moment of silence, and if you pray, with a silent prayer for peace. We begin our service this morning with this reading, which is a quote by Unitarian Universalist educator Reverend Sophia Lyon-Foz. Quote, "We are resolved to protect individual freedom of belief This freedom must include the child as well as the parent. The freedom for which we stand is not freedom of belief as we please, not freedom to evade responsibility, but freedom to be honest in speech and action, freedom to respect one's own integrity of thought and feeling, freedom to question, to investigate, to try, to understand life and the universe in which life abounds, freedom to search anywhere and everywhere, to find the meaning of being, freedom to experiment with new ways of living that seem better than the old. Unquote. Our opening hymn this morning is number 110, Come Children of Tomorrow, and it will be sung this morning by Lana Henson and Kate Rotler, along with Warren Palmer.
Children of tomorrow, come, new glory dawns upon the world. The warring banners must be furled, the earth become our common home. From plain and field and town there sound the stirring rumors of the day. Old wrongs and burdens must make way for all to tread the common ground. Divided we have long withstood the love that is our common speech, the comrade cry of each to each is calling us to humanhood.
Every Sunday, we take an offering, and since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work, our Change for Change partners. For the month of March, we have a new Change of Change partner now for this month, and it is Friends for Folks. Friends for Folks is a program that pairs rescued dogs with inmates at Oklahoma's Lexington and Mabel Bassett Correctional Centers. The inmates train the dogs to be companion animals for people with disabilities. If you're here in the building today, you can leave your offering in the plates as you exit, and children and youth will be invited to leave an offering in the plate when they exit in a few minutes after our story for all ages. Of course, you can also make your gift by sending a check to First Unitarian. Just write Change for Change in the memo line, or make an online payment through our website, number 1UC.org. And now our offertory again from our bell choir.
Thank you, Bell Choir. So before we begin our RE program dedication, I have a short story to tell you. The title of this story is Little Jimmy and the Third Smooth Stone. It was little Jimmy's favorite time of the school day, recess. Every day they had a whole half hour of recess, and he looked forward to it every day. Even though he liked learning, sure, he always needed a break, and recess gave him just the time he needed to recharge for the rest of the day. But today, when he got outside for recess, he found his friends playing a game he couldn't understand. There was a lot of running around, which looked fun, but every so often, someone would yell, "Cat!" and everyone would turn around 3 times and start to run in a different direction. He was just about to join in on the running when he heard a girl yell, "Now you're the bird!" The bird? When he saw his friend Susie run by flapping her arms like a bird, he guessed that meant Susie was the bird. But what did that mean? As he stood there trying to figure it out, he looked around and he saw Christina sitting down on the bench. Christina couldn't run like the rest of the class. She hurt her leg, and while the doctor told her she wasn't allowed to run for a while, and she looked pretty sad. She noticed him looking, and he decided to give her a big smile and a friendly wave. But he looked over at the swing set and saw a couple of other friends, Jose and Leslie, sitting on the swings looking just as confused as he was. He went over and asked Jose, "Do you know what they're playing?" Jose shook his head. Leslie replied, "I have no idea. It looks fun, but they started playing it before I knew what was going on. I don't know the rules." Jimmy frowned. "I don't know them either," he said. Jimmy looked around, and the more he looked, the more he saw that not everyone was playing. Something didn't feel right to Jimmy. Most of his friends in his class were playing this game, but not everyone could. Some people didn't know how to play the game, and others couldn't run around like everyone else. It didn't seem fair. They were one big class of friends, and they should all play together. He realized something important right then. How they are together matters. Sure, a lot of his friends were having fun, but they were causing other friends to feel bad, feel left out, feel confused. It matters how they are all playing together when they're together. Jimmy stood up from the slide and softly said, "How we are together matters." He was pretty proud of what he realized, only to find that no one had heard him. So Jimmy took a deep breath and shouted as loud as he could, I'm not going to do that, "Stop! How we are together matters." And this caused the game to stop. "What do you mean?" asked Susie. "Y'all are playing a game, but not including everyone. I never heard what the rules of the game were, and other people can't run, and this doesn't seem very fair. We should be playing together." And after a moment, Susie said, "You're right, Jimmy. We should find something that everyone can play together." So they spent the next 10 minutes as one big class coming up with a game together. It took longer than Jimmy thought it would, but soon everyone had agreed on what the rules of the new game would be. And you know what? They all had a great time playing their new game because this time everyone was included. Because this time everyone agreed to the rules. Because this time they were truly together. How we are together matters. We believe as Unitarian and Universalists in covenants over creed. But what is a covenant? A covenant is a list of promises we make to each other so we can all be in community together. Today, our classes will start coming up with their own covenant for the year. And we're starting off our religious exploration in-person program with a covenant right here and right now. So students, please rise. All of our children and youth, please rise. In body or in spirit. Thank you. Oh, there'll be a lot of these, so you can hold your applause to the end. Students, do you promise to bring your best selves to your religious exploration classroom? Do you promise to remember to create safe places for each other and to remember that how we are together matters? Do you promise to look out for each other and to make friends with your fellow classmates? Do you promise to have fun, to support each other, to be curious, and to ask your teachers and parents really hard questions about religion and faith? If you do, please respond with, "We promise." Thank you. You can be seated. Our children and youth can be seated. Teachers, if you're one of our volunteer teachers, please rise. Teachers, do you promise to show up? To show up for our children and youth on a regular basis. To show up intentionally and be your authentic, joyful selves in the classroom. To show up and build a true community with your students. To show up and build a true community with your fellow teachers. Do you promise to help our children and youth along their spiritual paths, and do you promise to help set up parents to be the spiritual leaders in their homes? If you do, please respond with, "We promise." You may be seated, and thank you for your service. Parents of our children and youth, please rise. Or grandparents, or guardians, or there we go. Thank you. Families, do you promise to be the primary religious educators of your family? Do you promise to support your child's faith development even when they ask really tough questions from time to time? Do you promise to do your best to bring your children to the religious exploration program for this weekly boost to their spiritual development? And do you promise not to neglect your own spiritual needs while helping your family build its collective faith? If you do, please respond with, "We promise." Thank you. You may be seated. And our staff members are Banana, Nathan, and Marlise. Please rise. And staff, do you promise to support our religious exploration program in our families? Do you promise to remember that every single one of us works for all ages of the church? Do you promise to remember to bring fun, joy, and creativity to the work that we do? And do you promise to keep families at the heart of our work and to consider the needs of families and the actions we take and the programs we create? If you do, please respond with, "We promise." We promise. Thank you. You may be seated. And finally, the entire congregation, please rise in body or in spirit. If you're watching us online, I also invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join us. Congregation, do you promise to support our Lifespan Religious Exploration Program through your financial contributions to our annual pledge drive and through volunteering for Lifespan Religious Exploration events? Do you promise to embrace your own religious exploration and model for our children and youth the importance of lifelong learning? Do you promise to shower our teachers with appreciation, to shower our parents with support, and to shower our children and youth with love? If you do, please respond enthusiastically with, "We promise." We promise. And now let our in-person religious exploration program commence. Please join us in humming our children and teachers off to class and clapping along. Reverend Dana will lead us in that. Children and youth, please follow me as we head off to our classes.
As the children are leaving, you can go ahead and be seated, but would you just join me in doing a clap? Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Being in this sanctuary, when empty, has always been a calming and peaceful presence to me. However, the times I've set foot in this place recently during the past 2 years have left me heartsick. Heartsick, yet hopeful. I wanted to see you in these pews. Growing up in this church, one of my early memories as a child was seeing Reverend Frank Holmes, Minister Emeritus, in this sanctuary for the first time. I was in awe as we came through those doors back there, for there he stood in front of these steps in his regal black pulpit robe with the velvet trim on it, looking larger than life. And my eyes widened as the sunlight came through all of these windows and streamed through right onto the minister. Today, my cue is gone because there's no sunshine. Back then, it was a more traditional time. The ushers wore dark suits headed by Mr. Raymond Ford. I remember him always speaking with our family after church in Daniel Hall. One of my favorite photos during this time was of my sister and me with our sailor collared dresses, short white gloves and hats, and our young brother with his crisp shirt and navy shorts on Easter Sunday. Today, I give for this congregation, or to this congregation, for all the faces that are gone now, but not forgotten. Those that came before, that built this building, this congregation. I give because this church is important to me. I've pledged every year giving between 5 and 10%, dependent on income, and I'm committed to increasing my pledge this year. I give for you, believers and non, my tribe. I see your beautiful faces, even beyond the masks, your spirit shining through. For our faith, free, but not free, our lifeline. I give for our youth, those you just saw walk through those doors for the first time in such a long time, and their dedicated teachers too. For those who were disconnected from the congregation during the pandemic and who we long to see return. For those who found us online, and for the ones that don't yet know about us, for they are our future. And I give for a much-needed new playground with accessibility for all that's scheduled to be ready sometime this year. I'd like to share these words by poet Amanda Gorman from her book, Call Us What We Carry, an excerpt from When. Someone will remember us this, even if in another time, even if by any other name. We wrap our arms around ourselves as if we can possibly hold the whole of who we are within us, everything that makes us this unearthly speck we are. Perhaps tomorrow cannot wait to be today. And so I give for the whole of who we are within us, our beloved community.
Thank you, Carmen. Would you please join me in a spirit of prayer or meditation? Great love, source of life's beauty and complexity, we gather in this sacred space, in this building and online, in our homes, seeking courage, renewal, insight, community, and a reminder that we are not alone in this world that overflows with tears of suffering. Today, we hold the people of Ukraine in our hearts. May the people, animals, and all living beings in that beautiful country find both safety and strength. We hold a special concern for those who are most vulnerable to targeted violence, dissidents, members of religious and ethnic minorities, and LGBTQIA+ people. We witness the people with disabilities and people of color who are being left behind, even as over 1 million people flee the violence in Ukraine. Even as bombs fall on the most sacred of historical sites, even on the holy ground of Babin Yar, the Holocaust's largest mass grave. May history not be forgotten. May the cultures of that land persist. Today we also remember the Russian people, the journalists, the protesters, the critics, all those who risk their lives for the sake of truth and peace. May they too find safety and strength. And lest we forget that just because there is a war in Europe, that doesn't mean that all other violence in the world has stopped. We also hold in our hearts today the people of Afghanistan, the refugees finding their way in new lands, including right here in Oklahoma City, and all those who were left behind. And we remember the people in all lands torn by violence and smothered by oppression in our own country too. We side with those whose well-being is under assault by the forces of hatred. May they too find safety and strength. And now, in silence, I invite you to hold upon your hearts the names of those who may be in need of love and care. And finally, may we not forget that even in the most difficult of times, there are moments of joy and great beauty. There is reason to be grateful. There is life persisting. There is love. I'd like to welcome our president of the congregation, Lynn Ann Wagner, who has a special reflection for us today.
Hello, precious ones. I'm Lynn Ann Wagner. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I have long, wavy brown hair, and I'm wearing a gray shirt and a blue sweater with a geometric pattern. I'm your congregational president. I just watched the rest of my family leave for the religious exploration, often referred to as RE, program. My partner Derek, teaching in elementary RE. Our daughter Rosalina, it's her first year in the youth RE class, and our son Hutton in the elementary RE class. I am so happy for them to be back in the RE program in person. We have missed this. The RE program is critically important for my family, for all of our children and youth, and for our whole congregation. The younger generation in our community have suffered during the pandemic, and we must bring special attention to creating exceptional programming for them, to reconnect them to our congregation and values. Now is an important time to raise children with the UU values of thinking for themselves, fighting for the most marginalized in our communities, for our environment, and for peace. Empathy for all, even for those with greatly differing viewpoints. Appreciating science, radical inclusion so nobody feels left out, and most of all, love, love, love for themselves, all beings, and our precious earth. I want to see our RE program thrive. We have our wonderful new Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration well placed to do this, but it will also take money. Another reason my family supports this congregation is because of the music. When I was 11 years old, the Gray Hymnal came out, and our shared UU music became the music of my childhood. I am brought to tears by so many songs in that book, my favorite being Come Sing a Song With Me. And as an adult, I have fallen in love with so many songs from our Teal hymnal, Blue Boat Home being my new favorite song. I also love hearing music composed by our members and new music brought into our services that is not in one of our hymnals but fits well with our UU values. I cannot wait to hear these songs be sung by our choir and together as a congregation. In the past, First Unitarian has been known for its excellent choir, organ, and other music. It is time for us not to just bring back this important part of congregational life, but to build on past success, to create a program even more robust and diverse than it was before. This can only happen if we have the funds to hire the most qualified music director and organist. This brings me to our staff. I know you all agree with me when I say we have a wonderful staff who have gone above and beyond during this pandemic. These beautiful, hardworking people who love our community dearly and give so much of themselves deserve to be fairly compensated. In the past, this congregation hasn't compensated its staff fairly or provided adequate support in terms of health insurance and other benefits. This is not in keeping with our values. The board made a commitment to compensating our excellent staff at a fair level as recommended by the Unitarian Universalist Association. I am not comfortable with our work for justice being mainly in our larger community when we are not treating our staff justly in our religious home. We can only increase our staff salaries to fair levels with your financial support. These are only a few of our priorities for the coming year, and only a few of the ways that our congregation has a vital impact on our members, friends, children and youth, staff, and larger community. While I would like to stand up here and only share positivity, I cannot in good conscience do that. Let's be very honest and talk about difficult things. Unless we have a significant increase in pledges, we are going to have to make some very difficult decisions regarding our budget priorities. We need to increase total pledges by a minimum of 7% to fund all priority areas. What we are asking of you is to give what you can generously. If you can afford to increase your pledge by at least 7%, please do so to help us reach our goal. However, our situation is further complicated by the fact that coming out of the pandemic, many of our families are struggling financially and may not be able to increase their pledges or even need to decrease their pledges. For those of you who are able, please increase your pledge by even more. Consider 10 to 15%. I want to thank all of you in advance for your generosity, knowing that all of us give to this beautiful religious community with such great love, so that First Unitarian in this deep red state can continue to be an example in our local community and world of justice, equity, and compassion. Thank you, beloveds.
In the Ukrainian language, there are two words for love. One is lyubov, which can be used to describe familial or platonic love, or love for a thing. This kind of love can be profound, but it can also be reasonable. The other word for love is kochania, and there is nothing reasonable, abstract, or intellectual about that kind of love. Kochania is deep. Kochania is passionate. It burns like a fire, and like a fire, it must be tended. I want to talk to you today about kochania. Before we talk about that fire, I want to take you to the water. Specifically, I want to take you back to a pond in Massachusetts, in a town called Franklin, back in the year 1810. In that pond, on a warm summer day, a teenage boy went for a swim. And tragically, that boy, Stephen Mann, drowned. Stephen was the older brother of 14-year-old Horace. And Horace was already intimately familiar with tragedy. His father, a poor farmer with no formal education, had died just 1 year earlier. At Stephen's funeral, the Calvinist minister explained that his death was a punishment for swimming on the Sabbath day, and that for this sin, Horace's brother was certainly suffering the torments of hell. And he went into detail, describing the tortures meted out upon that young lost soul. For Horace, that was it. Despite his lack of education, Horace went to the local library and he studied different religions, seeking an alternative to the cruelty of Calvinism. Eventually, he discovered Unitarianism. He also educated himself to the point where he was admitted to Brown University, graduating valedictorian of his class. From there, Horace Mann became a lawyer and a member of the State Senate of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In 1837, the Massachusetts government established the first state board of education in the country, and Horace became its secretary. For several years, Horace traveled by horseback, visiting school after school, and after a while, he developed his own theory of education. Now, at this time, American Unitarianism was dominated by a belief in the perfectibility of humanity and society through study, spiritual practice, social justice, and adherence to so-called natural moral law. Reverend William Ellery Channing preached about humanity's likeness to God. And for Horace Mann, education was the key to human godliness. Horace believed that education could be society's great equalizer and great liberator, and he worked to create a tax-funded, statewide system of non-sectarian schools staffed by professional teachers with professional standards. Horace Mann took the profession of teaching seriously, writing that, quote, "Teaching is the most difficult of all the arts and the profoundest of all the sciences," unquote. For him, teaching wasn't about stuffing students' heads full of facts. It was about creating responsible and moral citizens. It was about inspiring students with a desire to learn. And it is in large part thanks to Horace Mann that we have a clearly defined academic year, uniform curricula, standards for coursework, and professional standards for teachers. And this is why so many schools are named after Horace Mann today, including the elementary school in Oklahoma City that was adopted by our church some time ago. But Horace's legacy as the father of public education, tied as it is to words like curriculum and standards, sometimes seems like it has been stripped of one important element: passion, fire, koinonia. My mom was a teacher, and I can still remember when she was taking classes to get her degree. The books she would bring home had titles that seemed so boring, with a lot of words that I didn't understand, words like pedagogy and metrics. And yet, what she did in the classroom and the stories she'd bring home about it were far from boring. The stories she told about her students were full of tragedy, joy, deep disappointment, and pride. One thing was always clear to me. My mother loved her work. She loved it with her whole heart, her whole being. And for the most part, teaching loved her back. I wonder today how many teachers feel that they are loved back when so many of them are working in what amounts to a war zone. There are many kinds of teachers. There are parents who homeschool, mentors, private school teachers, coaches, gurus, mullahs, rabbis, religious education teachers, and the list goes on. But I want to focus this morning on public school teachers, partly because of their special link to our faith through the person of Horace Mann, and partly because of the unique challenges they face. Let me begin with this one data point. According to the Washington Post and Education Week, there were more school shootings in 2021 than any year since those numbers were recorded. There was, of course, a deadly pandemic. And now add to this the violence associated with the pandemic. There was the California teacher who was hospitalized after he was attacked by a parent who didn't like the mask mandate. There were the teachers in Kansas who were compared to the Taliban by anti-masking protesters. There were the teachers who had to be protected by police when anti-maskers attending school board meetings became violent. In addition to all this, there's the specter of state-sanctioned racism, sexism, and transphobia. As of February 1st, at least 36 states have adopted or introduced laws or rules that restrict teaching about race and gender. Here in Oklahoma, Governor Stitt signed into law a measure, House Bill 1775, that limits teaching on institutional racism and white privilege. That same law bans teaching course content that would, quote, make any individual feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex, unquote. This theme of discomfort is woven throughout the movement to resist educational freedom. In Texas, one state representative made a list of 850 books dealing with racism or sexuality that, quote, might make students feel discomfort, and demanded that schools investigate whether these books were in their libraries. Here in Oklahoma, just last month, Attorney General John O'Connor announced that his office would be reviewing over 50 books to determine whether they violate the state's obscenity laws. While this list included classics like Of Mice and Men and Lord of the Flies, it was heavily weighted with books dealing with racism and white supremacy and with LGBTQ plus perspectives. Thankfully, the Attorney General's office backed off of this threat one day later. But in the Oklahoma legislature, bills have been proposed that would be laughable if not for the possibility that they could become law. Like the, quote, Students' Religious Belief Protection Act, which includes an option for parents to sue teachers for $10,000 for each instance in which they might contradict a student's religious beliefs. That same senator introduced a bill that would enable parents to challenge books containing content of a sexual nature, including books addressing gender identity and sexual orientation. A librarian would have 30 days to remove the offending book or risk being fired. That bill recently passed through the Senate Education Committee. Public school teachers and many state university faculty are being caught in the crosshairs of the politicians and special interest groups that would harm trans and queer children and young adults. A bill in Arizona would require school staff to get written permission from parents before students can participate in LGBTQ groups or in any club involving sexuality, gender, or gender identity. In Florida, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill would ban discussion of sexuality and gender identity in schools. That bill has already been approved by Florida's House and goes before the state Senate this week. And in Texas, the governor has called for any licensed professionals, including teachers, to report families who affirm their transgender children for potential investigation under threat of criminal prosecution. When Horace Mann said that teaching was the most difficult of all the arts, could he have envisioned the situation that educators find themselves in today? Because today, teaching isn't only one of the most difficult vocations, it's also dangerous. And it requires more than professionalism. It requires courage. It requires passion. I want to circle back to where I started with that word, kochania. Although I've studied Russian for a long time and I used to teach it, I just recently started to study Ukrainian as one very small, not entirely unimportant act of solidarity. I first heard the word kochania in a CBS News interview with a Ukrainian high school student that aired a couple of days before Putin launched his attack on the country. In that interview, the student talks about her fears and about her resolve to stand for her people and her culture. And she mentions how one uniquely Ukrainian word, kochania, has been giving her strength. Love. Not just any love, fiery, passionate, deep, transcendent love. A love that will not yield to fear or to hatred. In Ukraine, just like in this country, many schools had been closed during the pandemic. Others had remained open or recently reopened. And in the weeks leading up to the invasion, it said that some parents began sending their children to school, not just with masks, but with stickers denoting their blood type, just in case. And there, too, were the teachers. The late Fred Rogers once wrote, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.' To this day, especially in times of disaster, I remember my mother's words, and I am always comforted by realizing that there are still so many helpers, so many caring people in this world." Unquote. I would like to amend that thought to say, when we see scary things in the news, look for the teachers. Look for those who will not yield to fear or to hatred. Look for those who are driven by a deep, transcendent love, and go beyond looking and support those teachers. Fight for those teachers. Be a teacher. Be comforted, knowing there are so many caring people in this world. Our closing hymn is The Fire of Commitment, with words by Mary Catherine Mourn and Jason Shelton, performed by Lana Henson and Kate Rottler.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love and community which burns in our hearts.
After our postlude, I invite everyone who is joining us online to come back for our virtual coffee hour. And for those of you who are here in person, remember that we will have our first in-person virtual social time after the service. If you checked in and you were assigned a room, you'll just go through these doors and follow the crowd upstairs to the religious education rooms that we will be monitoring for CO2 to clear them for our children to use. If you are a newcomer or you are somebody who is not comfortable with doing that monitoring for the CO2, you're welcome to go into Daniel Hall as well. And now, may you go in peace, in strength, and in the light and love of community. Peace, peace, peace.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands of far and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Side doors. If you're going up to one of the RE rooms, you can either get there by the elevator or go down the hallway to the stairs, or if you are a newcomer or you'd like to be in a larger space, please join us in Daniel Hall.